So how to get your AI to write like you, and you is in quotes because very few of us here are probably novelists, and we write, we're working stiffs and we write for organizations. So if that's your school, you might be the marketing department and missions. You might do ghost writing for, say, the president of your institution. So this is how to get AI to write like you. And also, if you are in charge of a team, how do you get people who are contributing to content generation so that everybody can kind of start to sound on brand? And to Brendan's point, we don't necessarily want everything to sound the same. We want it to sound like that institution. And so we want there to be consistency. And what really I'm going to show you is how you can have more reliable, like right now, your AI might be generating like 70% of the way, and you're putting in a lot more human effort. What I'm going to show you, hopefully you can get more like 90, 95% of the way there. So then you are bringing that experience, that editorial voice at the end, to kind of wrap things up. So let's get started. Sorry. There we go. Oh, that's me again. Hi. Uh, so there is a publication about AI. It's called and every day they drop a new newsletter or essay. Sometimes it's a podcast into your inbox. And so I think it's really good. It is a little bit pricey. You do have to subscribe for it, but I think that it's worth it. And they have, plans where you can kind of, get your whole team on. They also have some AI products that are really around kind of content generation. So really great stuff. One of my favorite writers there, her name is Katie, and she had this article that came out a couple of weeks ago, and it really kind of solidified the process that I have been and the marketing team here at Element has been doing to get that consistency across when we are creating content. So I fed my essays to ChatGPT until it learned my voice. And she starts by explaining, okay, well, what is this in the world of AI? What is this trying to get your AI to talk like you? And there's actually a term for it. I'm sure it'll change in 2 weeks, like everything else in AI. But right now, context engineering. And that sounds really technical, but it's really something that people in communications and marketing departments and branding, advertising have been doing for a really long time, hundreds of years. I'm sure, once the Gutenberg press came in, there were people talking about how do we make, style guides, how can we be consistent across publications. So it's those examples and the rules and the patterns that you show AI, just like you would show a human team. This is how we go about doing things. So here's some examples that I'm sure some of them you're familiar with. Some of them we've been talking about. Danielle just talked to us about deep research as part of her prompts to do the market analysis. So you have your in-house style guides, the words to use, the ones to avoid. Do you have, inside your school, you might abbreviate things in certain ways. You capitalize things one way and not the other. So there's kind of that fine detail that might be different than like AP style or Chicago. It's kind of your unique spin on things. And then you want to feed your AI deep research documents. So used to be maybe you would do focus groups with prospective students and a 40-page document might come out of that and kind of sit on a shelf. Now you can kind of fast track a process like that, like we've seen in some of the presentations, and ask AI, do this deep research for me. And you have a document that comes out of that. And so rather than kind of just use it for your particular task, what you might be working on, I'm going to show you how you can gather all these, give it to your AI so everybody is kind of working from the same knowledge base. You can also gather examples of things you like. These do not have to be within your industry even. You can think about like, your brand, like kind of look and feel might be more like Apple versus Microsoft. So simple, clear, minimalistic. Put all those things into a document, what you like, what you aspire to be like. Think of like mood boards, things like that. Then you can go and find your best performing content. Like, oh, this landing page generated, all of these inquiries. This form was like the best form ever. Look at the stuff that's doing really well and this is a way for you to repeat that. And the stuff like these best practices aren't just living in, somebody's head. They're going to be able to be shared across their team. Campaign briefs, this is another tried and true thing that we're probably used to. And, what is the goal? A good example of this might be launching a new graduate degree program. What is that brief that's going to talk about, what it offers, going into the idea of personas, what demographic, how do you want to message to them? What are their pain points? What are they maybe bringing to the communication that you need to address? And then there's also kind of configuring and instructing your AI. And this is, again, not at the prompt level, but kind of a level higher. So we'll go back to Katie for just a second to see kind of how she went about going and creating these kinds of documents for herself. So her column is called Working Overtime. This is, I think, probably how she gets a lot of her clients. She is very dedicated to it. She wants it to serve a certain purpose. And I think that what I really like about reading her example and other writers is there's a lot, I know I had a lot of skepticism about, I don't want some machine to write for me. I think writers, creative people, we have a lot of identity tied up with what we create. So there's some resistance to like giving it over to the AI. But as Katie explains, and I'm sure as you have used it, AI, you really need a lot of that human judgment to actually make high quality stuff that comes out on the other side. So she did her mission, her core directives. She wants her essays to always be delivering something that she's developed this trust with her audience. So she kind of put in a bunch of her essays that she really liked, kind of reverse engineered what was going on, came up with guidance documents like this. And then she also, which I think is really interesting, is look at the things that I do that are not great. I think we all, like I'm probably doing while I'm talking to you, filling in with ums. When we write, we fill in with kind of like vague phrases just to kind of get from point A to point B. So she has her AI look out for that, kind of keep her honest. Performance killing patterns proven by data. So, this is not just kind of subjective, I do or do not like this kinds of phrase. This is like what actually works, and let's bake that into things. So now let's take a look at how we actually do this at Element and how you can do something similar. So in ChatGPT, if you might be familiar with you can create your own GPT. So we have one called the GTM Assistant, and not to give you yet another acronym, but it is go to market. So the idea here is people on the marketing team, people who might be on the sales team can go in and use this, and we're working from the same knowledge. And that's where we have these documents that I was referring to. So we have messaging about different aspects of the platform. We have deep research on kind of best practices. You can think about, yesterday we had the presentation about GEO. So instead of search engine optimization, we have optimizing your content for large language models to find. So that could be a full document, rather than hiring, you used to have to hire an SEO expert to create content that was SEO optimized. It's too optimized. But now you can have that created as a document, give that to your GPT, and it's going to have that insight and that skill set. And it's going to just do it lickety split. It's not something that they need to relearn every single time. So we also have, you can give the knowledge documents. Then also with GPTs, there's an area for instructions where this is where I like to put things like always write at this grade level. These are like the voice and tone that you want to use throughout, like anything that you're ever going to write, GPT, do it this way. So kind of these really foundational things. And then because AI, we like to say, doesn't have a bad day, sometimes they do, and sometimes they just don't give you the output that you want. So I find that if I can go in and tinker with these instructions, that way I can have a little bit more reliability about what's coming out. So we're going to take this as an example of how we actually use this GPT to create some content at Element. So this is an example of a prompt, and similar to what we've been talking about, the way those long, extensive prompts are not necessary as much anymore. With GPT-5 that makes that possible. And also by grounding your GPT, or you can also set these up as projects with this knowledge, you don't need to re-explain everything over and over again. So we have our Bolt agents, which you might be using if you're on Element 451. And basically, they're agents who you assign tasks to within the platform, help me recruit this population of students, and they go and they do that job. So I wanted to create some social ads about them, and I wanted to focus on the problems that they solve. I mentioned here, this is a messaging document that you have. Again, sometimes I find you got to just kind of remind the AI. Sometimes it surprises you and you don't have to do things like that. So I asked again, give me 5 concepts. And these are examples of the documents that are in its knowledge. Um, and here are the concepts that it came up with, and they are all pretty close. Again, this is where your editorial judgment experience is going to come in on which one you think is a really solid one to run with, which one maybe is not right, which one maybe you want to, again, you do that iterative chain and kind of do another round on. And so what I did with this is gave this to my colleague who did something similar with AI, but it was with Sora to create an image so that we can make a complete social ad with this. And this is what we came up with. So that Sora, that image creator tool, knew what the orange is in our style guide, knows our visual kind of minimalistic look. And so put it all together, and we have this complete thing that really honestly back in the day would have taken at least a couple of days if you're working with an agency for them to turn it around. You think of all the different eyes that need to be on something, approve, no, use this word or that word. And this we came up with probably about an hour, if not, a little bit less. And it really is that upfront time that you're putting in to give it all these documents. And then on the other end is kind of using your judgment. Is this right? Is this not right? What are we going to go with? Do we need to iterate a little bit more? But overall, you can imagine, if you're bringing new writers on a team, if you're hiring freelancers, if you have folks who might not be in your department, you have students who might be only working with you for a semester, you just have a lot more reliability about what kind of content that you are going to be producing, kind of at scale and more reliably. So. That is it, how to get your AI to sound and write more like you.